Well, I did not expect to be doing another Last Jedi video at all, but certainly not this soon. But shortly after the release of Solo, I was introduced to this article by Sean T. Collins over at Decider.com. Do you want to lay odds on whether there will be spoilers in this video? Well, let me save you any anticipation. Yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of spoilers. Like a lot of them. Pretty much all centered around The Last Jedi. And maybe A New Hope. But pretty much all about The Last Jedi. Now, the article is titled, "The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars movie, but its haters and stans are both wrong about why." Now, I appreciate that Collins thinks the critics whining about social justice warriors and diversity are, well, full of crap. And while he does go through a list of why he thinks that a lot of the defenses don't work, there's one that stood out to me more than any that I felt really should be answered. The real problem Collins sees is, well, he writes, "No, the problem with The Last Jedi on that what is this teaching us level is its repeated reliance on suicide attacks. Not just suicidal or high risk or against long odds. That's been the stuff of this series since the Death Star attack. But actual suicide attacks that depend on the attacker's willing self-annihilation to succeed. Knowing there's a good chance you could die, and knowing for a certainty that you will die because of your own actions will ensure it, are two very different things, no matter how often people yell at me on Twitter to the contrary." Specifically, Collins cites Paige on the bomber, Holdo light speeding into the First Order, Finn going towards the big cannon thing, and Luke exhausting himself to death with the Force projection. So, I'm going to be frank. I really take issue with citing some of these as suicide attacks. I mean, two of them, it's a somewhat, it isn't inaccurate. But I guess I'm asking a question of, is it so wrong that characters are willing to sacrifice themselves? That they go in knowing they're not coming back. Is that a bad thing? So here I'm going to start with the one that absolutely I don't even think is right to call a suicide attack. So we're going to start with Paige. Now, see, Paige is in a bomber that is going over the big bad ship. She manages to drop the bombs. The bombs explode and ultimately also consume her ship, which is why it's being defined by Collins as a suicide attack. But here's the thing. It's clear that the ship is on its way down. It's going to crash no matter what. It's just a matter of where it's going to crash. Now, if it goes past the drop point, then there's a good chance that even when it crashes, in spite of being full of bombs, it's not going to do the effective damage it needs to be done. So her goal is to try and get the bombs to drop on the drop point before the ship crashes. She can't just jump in, fly, and turn around. It's very clear that she's going to die. There's either way. Even if she doesn't drop those bombs, that ship is going to crash. So it makes a lot of sense that her goal, her last moment purpose, is to try and get those bombs to drop. The fact that they consume the ship is incidental. It isn't the point. She isn't trying to destroy her bomber. She just knows that if those bombs don't fall at that point, it's too late. And now Collins has suggested this is nothing like the A-Wing pilot ship colliding with the Super Star Destroyer in Jedi, because that's clearly an accident. He isn't trying to hit the ship. Except she's not trying to pilot the ship into the big massive destroyer either. She's just trying to drop the bombs. Her ship's going to crash into it no matter what. That accident is set. This isn't a situation where she has a choice. The bombers also weren't making a suicide run. That wasn't the purpose. Poe didn't go in thinking they would all die. It was, you know, it was high risk. Poe went in knowing there's a good chance they could all die, but that most certainly was not the plan. He clearly in his mind thought, well, we're going to ultimately get out of this, and it's going to work. Luke, well, this one could get a little messy, but I don't really think it is that messy. Now, my previous video explains how I feel about the whole Luke storyline, so let's just kind of address the core point of Collins. Collins writes, Luke's Force-augmented passing could be a move similar to the one made by Obi-Wan Kenobi when he allowed Darth Vader to kill him, knowing he could live on as a Force ghost and aid Luke more effectively that way. But the film ends before we get any signs that this is what happened, unlike A New Hope, in which the slain Obi-Wan speaks to Luke from beyond the grave repeatedly, and we can only judge what's on the screen. Except, I would point out that the film shows us a Force ghost. Luke fades into the Force, just as Obi-Wan vanished. This is the 8th film, something Collins emphasizes. Well, he notes it's the 9th, which is true if you're excluding the Clone Wars film and the Ewok TV movies. There is an established canon, and on top of that information given in the film, we have this line.
See you around, kid.
And that line makes no sense outside of Luke becoming a Force ghost. Of course, J.J. Abrams could screw that all up, but the point is, the series canon and information given in the film all point to Luke returning as a Force ghost. Luke's actions are as much suicide as Kenobi's. Now, Holdo's light-speed assault is a suicide attack in the most technical of terms. But the film presents two options. Somebody pilots the ship into the First Order fleet, or the First Order picks off every ship until they're gone. These are the two options given. And of those options, I cannot see an argument that favors Holdo not piloting that ship. And we can only judge what's on the screen. And finally, there's Finn and his attempt to take down the cannon. Rose, of course, interferes, but is Finn being willing to die for the sake of his friends, well, bad? I cannot help but think back to that sequence in Captain America: The First Avenger. You know what I'm talking about, right? So before Steve Rogers gets the super soldier serum, wait. Spoilers for Captain America: The First Avenger. I'll give you a moment to stop the video if you have not seen Captain America: The First Avenger. Now, okay, so Steve is a scrawny and weak little guy. Tommy Lee Jones is really annoyed by him even being considered as a candidate. He's certain that Rogers is unsuitable for their purposes, especially as a soldier. So to prove his point, Tommy Lee Jones lobs a grenade into the midst of the group of candidates. Everyone leaps away except Steve. He throws his scrawny frame over the grenade. Of course, the grenade is a dud, but none of the soldiers knew this. They all jump away from it. And the point of this is not, Steve is suicidal. The point is, Steve is willing to give his life for others. This is actually an example of just why he's the right choice. It's a sign of just how noble and heroic Steve is. His virtue. And this pays off in the end when Steve decides he must crash the plane so that it doesn't reach its programmed destination. Steve is not thinking he is maybe going to survive. He's not expecting that he'll get frozen for like 70 or 80 years and then get thawed out. He assumes he will die, which is why he talks about missing the dance with Peggy. It is that knowledge of what he is about to do that makes it so heartbreaking, and it's absolutely a noble decision. You know who else seems to think this is noble? Jesus. In John 15:13, Jesus says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Now that verse does not say, "Greater love has no one than this," knowing there's a good chance you could die, which ends up with you laying down your life for your friends. No, willingly sacrificing yourself has long been seen as heroic. We give soldiers posthumous medals for sacrificing themselves in certain situations. We praise soldiers who went into no-win situations rather than running away, and then they died. And of the two instances in this film where people are making suicide attacks, Finn and Holdo are in fact laying down their lives for the sake of their friends. They're sacrificing themselves so their friends might survive. The Last Jedi embodies this principle better than any other film in the series. And in part because such a notion is, indeed, as Colin states, rather unprecedented in the series. So there you have it. Luke does not really commit suicide. Paige most definitely does not commit suicide. And Finn and Holdo embody a powerful principle of self-sacrifice. Thank you, Sean T. Collins, for helping validate my feeling that The Last Jedi is one of the best films in the series. As usual, you can respond to the comments or at trippingthroughgateways.com or at Tom Wade on Twitter.
See you around.